18 years ago, a Mexican-American nurse in Houston vanished after a night shift, leaving no trace, plunging her family into tragedy and the community into confusion. The police considered various possibilities from accidents to foul play, but found no body or strong enough evidence to proceed, leaving the investigation at a dead end. Yet over all that time, her husband and son never gave up hope, clinging to the belief that the truth would one day come to light. Then an unexpected clue emerged, shifting the entire direction of the investigation and shocking everyone involved in ways no one could have foreseen. Before diving into this story, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe to keep following along with us. In July 2007, Houston's oppressive heat clung to every street and concrete wall, refusing to let go. And on that sweltering evening, the life of a Mexican-American family took an unimaginable turn. Linda Alvarez, 39, a dedicated nurse at Houston Methodist Hospital, finished a grueling 12-hour night shift. Her colleagues waved goodbye as she walked toward the parking lot, where her familiar blue Toyota Corolla sat quietly under the dim glow of a yellow streetlight. With a tired smile, Linda got into her car, started the engine, and disappeared into the city's vast night. But from that moment, no one saw her return. Her husband, Raul, waited at home with a reheated dinner, checking the clock repeatedly before calling Linda's unanswered cell phone. As hours passed, worry escalated into panic. By midnight, Raul called the police to report his wife missing, his voice trembling with desperation. The woman, known throughout the neighborhood for her dedication and kindness, had vanished without a trace. The police took the report, opened an initial search file, but in a bustling, noisy city, a small car and a woman quietly leaving a hospital could have melted into the darkness anywhere. From then on, a haunting question gripped not only the Alvarez family, but the entire community. Where did Linda go, and who was responsible for her disappearance? That same night, Raul reported her missing. Houston police immediately dispatched a patrol team to Houston Methodist Hospital, combing the parking lot where Linda was last seen and expanding the search to surrounding roads. Flashlights swept across Buffalo Bayou, a canal prone to traffic accidents, but the water only silently reflected the red and blue lights of police cars. They also patrolled I-45, checking slopes and exits, hoping to find traces of the blue Toyota Corolla, but met only silence and thick darkness. Meanwhile, Raul and his family couldn't just wait. The next morning, they began printing hundreds of flyers with Linda's photo, posting them on telephone poles, grocery stores, and panaderia shops around the Mexican-American neighborhood in southeast Houston. David Lindeson, then just 12 years old, quietly followed his grandmother to the weekend market, handing out flyers, his tearful eyes impossible for passers-by to ignore. The Mexican-American community quickly rallied. San Jose opened its doors all night for prayers, the priests lighting candles and pleading for God to guide Linda home. The media swarmed in from the Houston Chronicle to Couve, all reporting relentlessly on the disappearance. Images of Linda in her nurse's uniform, smiling kindly, flashed across screens, interspersed with stunned commentary. A devoted woman who loved her job and family had vanished in the sprawling city. On Spanish-language radio, the announcer's voice urgently begged the community to share any leads. News spread rapidly, splitting public opinion. Some believed it was an accident, that Linda's car might have slipped into a dark canal. Others whispered of a kidnapping tied to criminal gangs operating along the Texas-Mexico border. And not a few malicious rumors pointed to Raul, suggesting he was somehow responsible. The pressure of gossip forced police to question Raul multiple times. In the interrogation room under cold neon lights, his exhausted face recounted every detail. Linda called to say she'd be home late. He reheated dinner to wait for her, and by midnight, when her phone went unanswered, he called the police in a panic. They checked call logs, bank accounts, searching for anything suspicious, but found nothing to incriminate Raul. He left the station with heavy steps, knowing the cloud of public suspicion still hung over him. The initial flurry of news and frantic search efforts gradually faded into silence. Week after week, Houston police collected dozens of statements, scoured countless traffic camera recordings, and combed through hospital records. But no clue was strong enough to lead them to the blue Toyota Corolla or Linda's whereabouts. Calls reporting sightings of her around the city turned out to be mistakes, and discoveries of submerged cars in canals proved unrelated. Initial glimmers of hope gave way to disappointment, then exhaustion. After a few months, the case was relegated to a different drawer, stamped in red as a cold case. On paper, Linda became one of hundreds of unresolved missing persons cases in Houston. But in the Alvarez family's small home, her presence never faded. With sunken eyes from sleepless nights, set up a small shrine in the living room, where Linda's photo in her nurse's uniform stood front and center. Before it sat a half-burned candle, a vase of fresh flowers replaced weekly by his mother-in-law, and a few of Linda's favorite items, a silver necklace, a notebook with hurried Spanish handwriting. The shrine became the household's sole emotional anchor in a home now void of laughter. David, just 12 at the time, grew up with an unfillable void. At first, he waited for his mother to knock on the door, imagining the familiar hum of the Corolla pulling into the driveway. Budas Houston's scorching summers and chilly winters passed. That hope dissolved. At school, David withdrew, speaking little, avoiding friends' questions about his mom. During Christmas, while peers bragged about gifts from their parents, David sat quietly, hands clenched, hiding tears. Each night before bed, he stood before the shrine, whispering questions no one could answer. "Where are you, Mom? Why didn't you come back?" Raul watched his son grow up in this absence, his heart heavy as stone. He tried to be both father and mother, the family's economic pillar, but could never fill the void of maternal love. He repeatedly attended community meetings demanding police continue the investigation, only to receive apologetic headshakes, limited resources, insufficient evidence, all leads exhausted. The police promised to keep the file open for new information, but R knew that meant Linda might be forgotten. 15 years ago, the community prayed together, but life moved on for others with their jobs and families. Only the Alvarez family remained trapped in unrelenting memory. Meals lacked laughter. Linda's birthdays passed insolence. Her aging mother, Maria, still faithfully visited San Jose church weekly, lighting candles for her daughter, praying that if she couldn't see her again, God would at least reveal where Linda was. Year after year, no answer came. The case faded from headlines and the city's consciousness. Yet in that small home, Linda lingered in every photo, every item, every unfinished story. David, from a lost 12-year-old boy, grew into a teenager and then an adult, forever carrying the void of a son who never understood why his mother vanished. A decade passed quietly, Houston transforming daily with new buildings, widened highways, and sprawling suburbs. But in the Alvarez family's small home, time seemed frozen on that stifling July evening in 2007, when Linda never returned. R kept the shrine in the living room unchanged, a candle lit each night. Linda's photo in her nurse's uniform with her gentle smile glowing under time-yellowed glass. On her birthdays, the family gathered, around a small cake, softly singing a familiar tune, though every voice caught in their throats. Each Christmas, while neighbors hung dazzling lights, R's home stood quieter, a modest Christmas tree in the corner, with a few symbolic gifts at its base, missing Linda's decorating touch, missing the laughter of the woman who was once the family's soul. David grew up in that void, from a 12-year-old boy to a man in his 20s, never having the chance to properly say goodbye to his mother. He carried a heavy silence, sometimes a simmering anger at the injustice, but above all, a sense of being lost as he passed life's milestones, high school, graduation, college, his first job, without his mother's presence. R watched his song grow, tormented by knowing nothing could replace Linda's absence. During holidays, the table was still set for 4. Raul, David, Maria, and an empty place for Linda, a reminder she still belonged here. Maria, Linda's aging mother, now with white hair and a stooped back, never missed a church service at San Jose. Each morning she knelt quietly, praying the rosary, whispering for her daughter. In the flickering candlelight she murmured, "If she can't come back, please let my daughter rest, and let us know the truth." For her, faith was the only thread connecting the present to memory. The Mexican-American community in Houston, once fervent in their search efforts, had largely moved on. Neighbors who once posted flyers were now caught up in daily struggles, raising their own children and grandchildren. Sometimes during church services, someone would quietly mention Linda's name like an old wound. But conversation soon shifted to tuition, rent, or new jobs. The case vanished from newspapers and TV broadcasts, lingering only in the memories of three people. R repeatedly attended police meetings to ask for updates, but the response was always the same. No new leads, still a cold case. Each time he returned home, sat before the shrine, and stared silently into the kind eyes of his wife's photo, a sense of helplessness rising within him. 10 years could erase much malicious rumors, sensational headlines, neighbors' curious glances, but it couldn't erase the aching longing of a child growing up without a mother, the exhaustion of a husband striving to be both parents, or the steadfast faith of an elderly mother kneeling before God. To the outside world, Linda Alvarez might just be a name on a long list of Houston's unsolved missing persons cases, but to the Alvarez family, she was their heart, an unfillable void and a question hanging unanswered for over a decade. Where did Linda go? And who was responsible for her disappearance? In 2022, Houston was a far different city than it was 15 years earlier when Linda vanished. But for the Alvarez family, time seemed to stand still. Then on a sweltering June morning, startling news spread through the community. A volunteer diving group, Search and Recover TX, known for tackling long-standing missing persons cases, announced they would scan Buffalo Bayou, the murky canal, winding through Thessaly, suspected from the start but never thoroughly searched. The group's leader, a former Navy diver named Jeremy Vega, told the press they'd received dozens of requests from families of the missing in Houston, including Linda's case. Sonar equipment was lowered into the dark brown water, the screen displaying distorted shadows beneath the canal's bed. We saw at least 5, maybe 6 cars sitting silently under the mud, Jeremy said, his voice carrying through a handheld microphone. Some have been down there for decades. The sonar images grew clearer, her bodies covered in silt, warped steel frames. Each time a car's outline appeared, the team held their breath, knowing each vehicle might hold answers for a waiting family. After hours of work, they focused on a small sedan matching the size and shape of a Toyota Corolla. The car lay tilted, its front buried in mud, its body partially exposed. A crane was brought in, cables threaded under the chassis, and bit by bit the sedan was pulled from the water, metal screeching against the hum of machinery. As sunlight hit the faded blue paint beneath the mud, Jeremy's heart tightened. He quickly read the algae-covered license plate, and when wiped clean, the numbers matched those in Houston police records from 2007. The car Linda Alvarez drove that night. Dew spread rapidly, drawing reporters and onlookers to the canal's edge. Many whispering, "Could this be the car?" As police opened the vehicle, the stench of mud and rust filled the air. Inside, the seats were rotted, but a few personal items remained. On the floor, they found a nurse's badge engraved with L. Alvarez. In the back seat, a mud-stained white women's shoe, its fabric warped but stitching still recognizable. And within the cabin, amid thick layers of silt, police were horrified to discover human bone fragments. Jeremy and the Search and Recover TX team stood in silence. Realizing they had uncovered a truth buried for 15 years, the site was immediately sealed off. Houston police called in the forensics team, carefully bagging each item as evidence: the nurse's badge, the shoe, the bone fragments. That afternoon, when police knocked on the Alvarez family's small home in southeast Houston, both Raul and David knew their lives were about to change again, but nothing prepared them for the shock to come. The uniformed officer, voice calm, informed them that Linda's blue Toyota Corolla had been found in Buffalo Bayou, along with personal items and human remains. Raul sat frozen on the sofa, eyes wide but unblinking, his heart pounding as if it might burst. He had imagined thousands of scenarios over the past 15 years, but when the truth was spoken, he felt himself falling into a bottomless abyss. David, now a 27-year-old man, buried his face in his hands, tears streaming uncontrollably. His voice broke, choked as if squeezed in his chest. Mom was down there for 15 years, right under that water. The words cut like a knife through the household, making the air so heavy it was hard to breathe. Maria, Linda's elderly mother, stood trembling against the doorframe. Her frail hands clutched the rosary she always carried, her voice quivering in a whisper. "My daughter has finally been found," she sobbed, torn between pain and relief, having prayed for years just to know where her daughter was, no matter how cruel the answer. In the days that followed, the Alvarez home became a gathering place for relatives, friends, and neighbors. People brought food, flowers, and quiet words of condolence, but every gaze carried a shared unease. Linda hadn't vanished. She was buried in the heart of the city just miles from their home, unknown to anyone for all those years. Raul spent hours in torment, sitting before the shrine, the flickering candlelight reflecting on his haggarded face. He told himself that at least now he could give Linda a proper burial, no longer living in uncertainty. But with that relief came a new wound. Who did this? Who turned that July night in 2007 into an unhealable fracture in his family? David, who grew up in his mother's absence, suddenly felt his childhood wasn't just unanswered questions, but a prolonged injustice. Seeing his mother's belongings, the nurse's badge, the mudcake shoe, returned by police, he sank to the floor, hands trembling as he touched them, as if touching a lost piece of her soul. Mom was wearing these when she left the hospital, and it all ended there. David choked out, eyes red. Maria, after the initial shock, became the family's spiritual anchor. Sitting beside her son-in-law and grandson, holding their hands, she whispered that this wasn't the end, but a chance God gave them to seek the truth. Her prayers shifted from bring back to let justice be done. The media descended, cameras trained on the small house. Rex, exhausted, declined interviews, but David once stood at the door, tears in his eyes, saying briefly, "We lost our mom, but we haven't lost hope. We need to know what happened." His words became headlines, rekindling the case in Houston's collective memory. Pain flared anew, but so did hope. They now knew Linda didn't leave willingly, didn't vanish without reason. Someone had caused her car to end up in the canal. The Alvarez family was no longer just mourners. They became living witnesses to a truth about to be uncovered. The long nights, as candlelight flickered over Linda's photo on the shrine, Har vowed to himself that the story wouldn't end here. Linda deserved justice, and his family deserved answers. The discovery of the Toyota Corolla and the remains inside sent shockwaves through the Houston Police Department. Within days, Linda Alvarez's old file, buried in the cold case drawer for 15 years, was pulled from the dust. This time it wasn't the weary detectives of 2007, stumped by a lack of leads, but a dedicated cold case unit formed for long, unsolved cases. Given the case's gravity, the FBI was called in to assist with technology and national databases. Linda Alvarez's name was no longer just a closed file, but the center of a renewed effort. Leading the charge were Detective Karen Ruiz, 48, Puerto Rican detective known for her tenacity and eye for overlooked details, and Detective Mark Holloway, 54, a seasoned veteran who had cracked complex murder cases since the 90s. Karen and Mark stepped into the cold records room where neon lights illuminated wooden shelves stacked with dusty files, the air thick with the smell of yellowed paper. They pored over 2007 reports, grainy black and white surveillance photos, and scattered witness statements, realizing one thing clearly: Linda had not been searched for thoroughly enough. "She can't just be another statistic," Karen said firmly, while Mark nodded, jotting notes in his worn notebook. To them, Linda wasn't a forgotten name. She was a person, a mother, a wife, a dedicated nurse, and this case deserved closure. Karen immediately ordered a review of all physical evidence from the car, the items sealed by the scene investigators. The nurse's badge, the shoe, and especially the bone fragments, were sent to a forensics lab with DNA technology far advanced from 2007. The FBI provided databases to compare biological traces against millions of stored samples. Meanwhile, Mark focused on people. He recounted witnesses interviewed 15 years prior, colleagues at Houston Methodist, the night shift security guard, neighbors near the Alvarez home. Many had moved away, some had passed, but new memories surfaced. "That night, I remember a red pickup truck following Linda's car," one witness suddenly recalled. A detail hastily noted in the old file, but dismissed for insufficient information. Karen and Mark concluded the case wasn't a mere accident, but likely an intentional act. They reconstructed the timeline of July 20th, 2007. Linda left work at 10:30 p.m., exited the hospital at 10:45 p.m., called Raul at 10:50 p.m. saying she'd be late. and then vanished completely. Someone was following her, Mark deduced, pointing to a Houston map marked with red dots tracing her route. In a joint meeting with the FBI, Karen stated, "We have the victim, the car, the belongings, the remains. Now we need to find out who put that car in the canal and why. We need justice not just for Linda but for her family." The room fell silent, the weight of the responsibility palpable. Raul and David were invited to hear an official update. For the first time in years, the detectives before them didn't say, "We have no leads," but instead vowed the case would be fully reopened. Raul looked into Karen's eyes, seeing not pity but determination. David sat beside his father, gripping his hand, nodding slightly. They knew Linda was no longer forgotten. In the days that followed, Karen and Mark divided their tasks. Karen oversaw DNA analysis and evidence processing, while Mark tracked down old witnesses. Each new report brought clarity to the case but also stirred long-dormant pain. For the cold case unit, it was the only path forward. "We owe Linda the truth," Karen said, her voice steady as if it were her personal vow upon joining the team. From that moment, Linda Alvarez's case was no longer gathering dust. It was reignited with hope that justice, though delayed by 15 years, would finally be found. The blue Toyota Corolla hoisted by crane from the depths of Buffalo Bayou was not just a rusted heap of metal. It was a time capsule holding truths buried for 15 years. After the scene was secured, Houston police promptly transported the vehicle to the forensic examination lab within the city's criminalistic center. That day, detectives Karen Ruiz and Mark Holloway arrived early, standing behind safety glass as technicians began opening doors and inspecting every inch of the car. Thick mud coated nearly the entire interior, the stench of mold and rusted metal filling the room. Technicians, gloved and meticulous, used scalpels and small brushes to clear away layers of mud, handling each piece as if uncovering fragments of a person's memory. The rear window was shattered, cracks spreading like a spiderweb, while the front doors remained sealed. The seats inside almost entirely rotted. Upon examining the seatbelt area, a technician spotted faint brownish stains. "Could be dried blood," he said immediately, cutting the entire strap for DNA testing. Karen leaned closer to the glass, her heart racing. This could be the case's linchpin. Inside the cabin, more personal items surfaced. Beyond the nurse's badge and shoe found at the scene, they discovered a small silver bracelet caught in the seat's crevice. Raul later confirmed it was the bracelet Linda wore daily. Most critically, human bone fragments were found in the mud. Forensic experts carefully collected them, placed them in labeled containers, and sent them straight to the analysis lab. Both Karen and Mark knew that only DNA results could confirm definitively. Linda had been there for 15 years. Weeks later, the forensic report arrived. In a small meeting room, Karen opened the thick file in front of Raul and David. Speaking slowly, each word heavy, she said, "The DNA from the bones found in the car fully matches David's sample. This confirms the victim is Linda." Raul clutched his face, his body trembling, while David slumped onto the table, tears streaming down. Though they had suspected it since the car was recovered, hearing the official confirmation turned their pain into an undeniable reality. Linda had truly been under the canal all those years. But the report revealed a shocking detail. Traces of DNA from another person, not Linda's, were found on the seatbelt and other surfaces in the car, unrelated to Raul or any family member. Karen and Mark exchanged a glance, both realizing this shifted the case from accident to suspected crime. The foreign DNA meant someone else was in the car the night Linda vanished. Someone had sat in the driver's or passenger seat, left biological traces on the seatbelt, and most likely was responsible for Linda's death. Karen ordered the lab to run the unknown DNA through CODIS, the national database storing millions of criminal DNA profiles across the U.S. The process would take time, but she knew a match could reveal a name. Meanwhile, Mark focused on other physical evidence. The cracked window, scratches on the bumper, unusual deformations in the chassis. The technical report showed the car didn't accidentally fall into the canal. The angle of impact and force suggested it was driven at high speed, as if deliberately plunged into the water. As more data emerged, the picture clarified. Linda didn't lose control. Another hand was on the wheel. Someone was in the car and they left her to drown in the canal. When Karen presented to the interagency team, the atmosphere grew tense. An FBI agent concluded, "We're no longer talking about an accident. This is a homicide." Raul and David were informed about the unknown DNA. David, eyes red, whispered, "So all these years my mom didn't just go missing. She was killed." Raul sat motionless, hands gripping the table's edge until his knuckles widened, devastated. Yet a new spark of determination flared within him. The person who took Linda could no longer hide. Karen and Mark left the meeting, their eyes meeting. Both felt the weight of their duty to bring the name behind that DNA into the light. Linda Alvarez was no longer just a name in a cold file. She was a victim of a true homicide, and her family deserved answers after 15 years of waiting. After receiving the DNA results and the homicide conclusion, detectives Karen Ruiz and Mark Holloway decided the next step was to return to the starting point. Buffalo Bayou, where Linda's Toyota Corolla was recovered. On a gray autumn morning, they joined the forensic team and divers at the canal's edge. The murky water flowed quietly as if guarding more secrets. Karen stood by the bank watching ripples spread, her mind echoing a question. If the car was here for 15 years, what else was missed in that mud? Divers suited up, equipped with oxygen tanks, and descended one by one. Metal nets were lowered to collect anything emerging from the muddy bottom. Mark waited patiently, notebook open. After nearly an hour, a shout echoed from the water and hands surfaced, holding a small mud-covered object washed clean with purified water. It revealed a familiar shape, an old Nokia cell phone. Though its screen was cracked and keypad peeling, the Nokia logo remained visible. Karen held her breath as a technician carefully sealed it in an evidence bag. It could be Linda's phone. "If we're lucky, the SIM data might still be recoverable," she said softly. Less than half an hour later, another diver surfaced with a glinting object tangled in water weeds, a silver necklace with a small cross pendant. R later confirmed Linda never took it off. It was a birthday gift he gave her in 2002. As the necklace gleamed under dim morning light, the team felt a chill. Linda had been there, and her traces lingered. But the most significant discovery came not from the canal, but elsewhere. While the divers worked, Karen had requested the city's traffic data team to recheck 2007 surveillance footage. Most tapes were damaged or erased, but a persistent technician found a grainy video from a highway camera near the Buffalo Bayou exit, captured the night Linda vanished. The image was blurry, riddled with noise, but when enhanced with new technology, it showed clearly a blue Toyota Corolla driving on an empty lane, closely followed by a red Ford pickup. Karen and Mark stared at the screen as the footage looped repeatedly. The flashing headlights of that red Ford loomed like a silent specter trailing Linda in her final moments. "We missed this 15 years ago," Mark muttered, recalling a vague witness statement about a red pickup, dismissed for lack of detail. Now, the camera footage was undeniable proof that Linda had been followed. The phone and necklace were sent to the lab for processing. Technicians promised to attempt data recovery from the SIM or memory, though success was unlikely. The necklace would be tested for fingerprints or residual DNA. But most crucially, the video of the red Ford became the newest piece in the sharpening puzzle. Back at the cold case unit office, Karen spread out photos of the necklace, phone, and the red Ford frame on the table. She looked at Mark, her voice low. Linda didn't die alone in that car. Someone followed her, forced her, and led to this end. The known DNA and the red Ford. We need to find the connection. Mark nodded, his gaze resolute. He tapped the Ford photo. We need a list of everyone in Houston in 2007 who owned an old red Ford, especially those near the Alvarez home. Across the city, R and David were updated on the new evidence. R froze when he saw the silver necklace in the evidence photo, his trembling hand rising to his lips. "That's Linda's," he whispered. Tears welling, David gripped his father's shoulder, his eyes blazing with resolve. "If someone followed Mom that night, we need to know who he is." The items found in Buffalo Bayou weren't just objects. They were messages from the past, clues affirming that Linda's death wasn't blind fate. It was their result of a deliberate act. With the unknown DNA and the red Ford footage, the cold case unit now had a path to uncover the figure behind the darkness. When the unknown DNA from the seatbelt in the Toyota Corolla was sent to the federal lab and entered into CODIS, Karen and Mark could only wait. It was a tense, breathless period, knowing that a match could change everything. Days later, an encrypted email arrived at the cold case unit. Karen opened it, eyes glued to the screen. Match found Miguel Torres. Her heart skipped a beat. Miguel Torres, 57, was no stranger to Houston police records. Arrested in the 9-9s for assault in a bar fight. He had other minor violations but seemed to live quietly as a neighbor afterward. Mark frowned, flipping through paper files. Torres had lived in the same neighborhood as the Alvarez family in 2007, just a few blocks from R and Linda's home. He had even dined with the family, helped Raul fix plumbing, and teased David like a familiar uncle. My God, Mark muttered. He was right under our noses. Karen recalled the vague 2007 file note. A witness mentioned a red pickup following Linda's car. Checking 2007 vehicle records, they found Miguel Torres had owned a red Ford F-150 sold in 2010. The pieces fit together chillingly. The DNA in Linda's car matched Torres. The red Ford matched the witness statement and the recovered video, and his 2007 home was less than a meal from Buffalo Bayou. Karen and Mark reported their findings to the FBI and police leadership. In the meeting room, the name Miguel Torres elicited gasps. Torres, he was on the neighborhood council, one officer exclaimed. Indeed, to the community, Miguel was a friendly, middle-aged man who joined barbecues and lent tools to neighbors. But beneath that facade lay a buried history of violence. What made the case even more shocking was Torres's close ties to the Alvarez family. In an interview, recounted, Miguel sat at our dining table, drank beer with me, watched Linda smile. I never thought he could be involved. Those memories now cut like shards of glass into the widowed husband's heart. David sat silently, but his eyes burned with fury. He gave me candy, called me Chico, and all the while he might have taken my mom. Karen and Mark didn't rush to conclusions. They needed more evidence to turn the DNA match into a solid charge. They revisited the phone records. The Nokia recovered from the canal had partially restored data. Its call log showed a missed call at 10:52 p.m. on July 20th, 2007, just minutes after Linda left the hospital from an unlisted number. When cross-checked, it was registered to Miguel Torres. The clues piled up. Torres had called Linda just before she vanished. Mark also found residency records. In 2007, Miguel lived in a small apartment just a 5-minute drive from the canal where the car was found. He had every opportunity to act and cover his tracks. The full picture grew clearer. Linda left the hospital, possibly received a call from Torres, and her car was then tailed by the red Ford. Soon after, both she and the car were plunged into Buffalo Bayou, buried for 15 years. As news leaked that police were investigating a suspect known Anglophone. Known to the family, the community began to buzz. Old neighbors recalled Miguel's odd looks toward Linda at block parties, his habit of finding excuses to visit the Alvarez home at strange hours. One woman who lived nearby said, I once heard Linda say she felt uneasy when Torres kept dropping by. That testimony, overlooked in 2007, now cast a darker shadow on the puzzle. The news that Miguel Torres was suspected in Linda Alvarez's death spread like wildfire. Within 24 hours of local media reporting, Houston police focused investigation on former neighbor of Alvarez family. The Mexican-American community in southeast Houston was shaken. People gossiped in grocery stores, small restaurants, and church parking lots, asking the same choked question, how could it be Miguel? He was the middle-aged man with a ready smile, who fixed an elderly widow's roof for free, who gave candy to neighborhood kids during festivals. No way. He helped me fix my house, an older neighbor said, shaking his head on local TV. Miguel could be hot-headed, but a killer. I don't believe it. Doubt spread, splitting the community into two camps. One clung to the familiar image of Miguel, the neighbor who drank beer in their yards and shook hands warmly after Sunday Mass. The other recalled details they'd never dared voice. Miguel's lingering looks at Linda during block parties, his odd-timed visits to the Alvarez home. A young woman shared, "I remember Linda whispering she felt uncomfortable when Miguel kept stopping by. We thought it was trivial then. No, it gives me chills." As media coverage surged, San Jose Church, a decades-old long-gathering place for the Mexican-American community, held a special prayer vigil for Linda. That evening, hundreds of candles glowed across the sanctuary. The priest stood at the pulpit, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We pray for Linda's soul to rest in peace and for justice to be served." But the unity of 15 years ago was gone. In the back pews, some whispered the police might be mistaken, that DNA could be flawed. Near the front, others wept, believing the truth had finally surfaced, that Linda was a victim of betrayal within their own community. David sat beside his father and grandmother, eyes red. He listened to the murmurs around him, each word cutting into his unhealed wound. Raul bowed his head, hands clasped tightly. He knew many still looked at his family with pity mixed with doubt, but now, with Miguel Torres' name emerging, he felt both rage and pain. The man who once sat at their table, called Linda by her first name, was now tied to an irreparable loss. Outside the church, reporters set up cameras, asking residents for their thoughts. A young man said, "I grew up in this neighborhood. Miguel lent me tools for my bike. I can't imagine him doing this." A middle-aged woman cut in, "I trust the police. No smoke without fire. DNA doesn't lie." The conflicting responses reflected a simmering divide in the tight-knit community. In the following days, public outcry grew on social media. Debates raged. One user wrote, "If Miguel's guilty, we lived next to a killer for 15 years. That's horrifying." Another commented, "Be careful, the police might be scapegoating. I won't believe it until there's a conviction." This division weighed heavily on Houston's Mexican-American community, where neighbors now eyed each other wearily. For the Alvarez family, each day was a torment. Maria, her eyes clouded by age and tears, clutched her rosary, murmuring, "If it's really him, I don't understand why God let a wolf in sheep's clothing sit at our table." Raul remained silent, but rage churned within him. David felt betrayal to his core. The man he once saw as an uncle might have taken his mother. Amid the stifling atmosphere, the cold case unit stayed resolute. Karen and Mark knew that beyond the DNA evidence, they needed stronger proof to turn suspicion into a conviction. But for the community, Miguel Torres' name had become a focal point of unease, a topic for whispers in Diner's church pews and the restless sleep of the Alvarez family. Linda was finally remembered after 15 years, but the cost of her return was a community questioning. How long did we live beside this terrible truth without knowing? That late afternoon, as the sun dipped below the low rooftops of Houston's western suburbs, a convoy of police vehicles suddenly turned onto the street where Miguel Torres lived. The SWAT van's doors flung open, men in black body armor and helmets swiftly fanning out to surround a weathered beige single-story house. A loudspeaker echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "Miguel Torres, this is Houston Police. Come out with your hands up. You are under arrest by court order." Dogs barked from nearby yards. Children peeked through windows and adults gathered in small groups, whispering with nervous anticipation. Inside, Miguel, panicked, peered through the living room window. He wore a wrinkled shirt, his hair more than half gray. The loudspeaker blared again, stern and unyielding. After tense minutes that felt endless, the front door swung open. Miguel stepped out, hands raised, his face ashen, flashlights pierced his eyes. A shout rang out, "Get on the ground." Within seconds, 2 officers tackled him onto the lawn, cold handcuffs snapping tightly around his wrists. Onlookers stood stunned, some filming on their phones, capturing a moment no one could believe. The once friendly neighbor now face down, cuffed like a dangerous criminal. As Miguel was escorted to the police van, Karen and Mark entered the house to oversee the search. The home was cluttered, its furnishings old, hair thick with mildew. In a rickety wooden desk drawer in the bedroom, they found an old leather-bound notebook, its pages frayed. Karen gloved opened it to find scrolled handwriting in Spanish and English. One page sent a chill through her. "Linda cannot betray me. She's not mine, she's no one's." The words were a cold confession revealing a dangerous obsession that had haunted Miguel for years. In the living room, old photos lay scattered in a cardboard box. Some captured neighborhood parties with Linda smiling among the crowd. And in the frames corner, Miguel always lingered, his eyes fixed on her. Karen swallowed hard, knowing this was the final piece of the puzzle. Not just DNA, not just witness accounts, but evidence of a perilous fixation. News of the arrest spread within minutes. Flashing red and blue police lights lit up the neighborhood with TV cameras crowding outside the fence. A reporter broadcast live. Miguel Torres, once a familiar neighbor, has just been arrested in connection with the 2007 disappearance and death of Linda Alvarez. Neighbors stood behind, faces stunned, one woman muttering, "My God, it was him. All these years we lived next to a killer." David received a call from Karen right after Miguel was handcuffed and taken away. On the other end, R wassailant for a long time before saying, "I invited him to sit at our family's table." David clenched his fists, tears welling up. Mom died at the hands of someone we trusted. Maria, upon hearing the news, sank into a chair, whispering prayers, her rosary slipping from her hands. The community was stunned. Those who had defended Miguel, believing the police might be mistaken, were now speechless as evidence came to light. Others shuddered, recalling Miguel's friendly smiles, handshakes, and small acts of help. The mask of deceit had fallen, revealing a man consumed by obsession, willing to take the life of a woman who saw him as a neighbor. That night, Houston was heavy with unanswered questions. How could a community live alongside a perpetrator for 15 years without knowing? How many signs were missed? How many whispers ignored? And most importantly, why did Linda, a kind woman, a dedicated nurse, become the victim of a sick obsession? As police lights flashed, carrying Miguel Torres away, everyone knew one thing. This was just the start of a painful but necessary journey toward justice. When police officially confirmed to the Alvarez family that Miguel Torres had been arrested on charges directly tied to Linda's death, the atmosphere in their small southeast Houston home was a mix of shock, pain, and a strange sense of release. Raul sat motionless for hours on the sofa, staring into space. He couldn't believe the man who once sat in their backyard, clinked beer glasses at barbecues, and patted his shoulder after Sunday Mass was the one who likely pushed Linda into Buffalo Bayou. "I treated him like a brother," Raul said hoarsely, "and he sat at my table, watched my wife smile while harboring sick thoughts." Those words made David shudder. He recalled his childhood when Miguel gave him candy and called him Chico with a friendly tone. Now those memories became a repulsive burden. Maria, Linda's elderly mother, collapsed in tears upon hearing the news. She had to be helped to her room, sobbing as she clutched her rosary. "Heat tamales in my home, complimented my cooking, and now he killed my daughter." Her words cut like a knife into everyone present. Years of prayers, years of hope, and the answer was this cruel. The trusted neighbor, embraced by the community, was a wolf in sheep's clothing. For David, Miguel's arrest was a shock, but also brought a relief he'd never felt. Looking at his mother's photo on the shrine, his eyes teary but voice firm, he said, "At least now I know Mom didn't leave us. She was taken, and I swear I'll see this through to make him pay." Raul placed a hand on his son's shoulder, their eyes meeting for the first time in years, filled not just with pain, but with resolve. The family began preparing to give Linda a proper burial, something they dreamed of for 15 years. The police returned the identified remains and a few belongings. Raul and David visited a funeral home to choose a coffin, saying little, only quietly agreeing it should be simple but full of love. Just like Linda, Maria insisted on a funeral at San Jose Church where she had prayed tirelessly. The priest agreed, promising a dignified ceremony so the community could say farewell. In the days leading up, the Alvarez home was filled with relatives, friends, and neighbors offering help. Some brought flowers, others food. Some just sat silently with Raul to share the quiet. Everyone struggled to mention Miguel, a man many had trusted. A middle-aged woman whispered, "It's hard to accept, but at least Linda has answers. And so do you." On the funeral day, Houston's bright sunlight couldn't dispel the sorrow blanketing San Jose Church. A simple wooden coffin stood before the altar, surrounded by hundreds of candles and white flowers. Raul and David sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly, while Maria, trembling, stood to read a short prayer for her daughter. As hymns rose, the church erupted in tear. 15 years of waiting, and Linda was finally sent off as a person deserving respect. No longer a cold name in a missing persons file. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, David knelt, whispering, "Mom, I can promise you now I'll live to protect your memory. And I won't let justice be buried like your car in that canal." Raul stood beside him, eyes red but resolute. He knew the road ahead was long. The trial, the evidence, facing a man who was once a friend. But in that moment, as earth covered the coffin, he felt a part of Linda was finally free. The community, once divided, stood together by Linda's grave, holding hands in prayer. Though the truth was brutal, her death reminded them that blind trust can hide horrors. For the Alvarez family, this was both ultimate pain and the start of a new journey, facing the truth, preserving Linda's memory, and demanding justice for a woman betrayed within her own community. Miguel Torres' trial began on a sweltering May morning, nearly a year after Linda's Toyota Corolla was pulled from Buffalo Bayou. Harris County Courthouse was packed with reporters. Cameras aimed at the door where the defendant entered. Miguel in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, gray hair disheveled, face pale but eyes fighting calm. In the courtroom, Raul and David sat in the victim's family section. Maria supported as her frail hands clutched her rosary. All were silent, but tears fell as the coffin of memories was reopened before the public. District Attorney Angela McCarthy, a sharp young prosecutor, opened. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, we are here today to prove that Miguel Torres murdered an innocent woman, a wife, a mother, a dedicated nurse. Linda Alvarez. He hid his crime under dirty water for 15 years. But justice can never be buried." Her words echoed through the courtroom, prompting R to grip his son's hand tightly. Evidence was presented piece by piece. First, the DNA. Biological traces on the car's seatbelt matched Miguel Torres perfectly. Then, the old notebook found in his home with the chilling entry, "Linda cannot betray me. If she's not mine, she's no one's." As a photo of the page flashed on the screen, murmurs spread and Maria sobbed loudly. Angela continued, "And here, Your Honor, is restored 2007 traffic camera footage showing Linda's Toyota Corolla leaving the hospital, followed closely by a Redford F-150, a vehicle Miguel Torres owned at the time. The screen played the blurry but clear video of the pickup's headlights trailing behind. Miguel's defense attorney, David Crenshaw, a seasoned middle-aged lawyer, stood to counter. His voice was calm but sharp. "Your Honor, my client's DNA could be in Linda's car for innocent reasons. Social contact times he rode along or helped with repairs. Labeling it proof of murder is a dangerous leap. As for the notebook, who can prove when those words were written? They could be private thoughts unrelated to any crime." Crenshaw turned to the jury, voice lowering. "We cannot convict a man on emotional fragments. This is America here. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty." Karen and Mark sat behind the prosecutor, listening with clenched hands. They knew this case wasn't easy. Years had passed. Physical evidence was scarce and many witnesses' memories were hazy. But to them, every detailed DNA, notebook, Redford video formed a single picture. Raul and David couldn't hold back emotion when called as family witnesses. Raul took the stand, voice trembling. "Miguel ate dinner at my house. I trusted him. I never imagined he could be the one who took my wife." Tears welled up. He paused, then continued. "For 15 years, we lived in darkness. Today, I beg this court to give Linda the light of justice." David was called next. He stood tall, eyes locked on the defendant, voice choked but firm. "When I was a kid, he called me Chico, gave me candy. I saw him as an uncle, but he took my mom. I grew up with an unfillable void. Now I want him to look in my eyes and know I'll never forget." The jury sat still, unmoving. As the trial recessed, the courtroom remained heavy. Reporters spilled into the hallway, cameras following the Alvarez family's every step. Maria, escorted out, face wet with tears, whispered, "Justice is finally coming." But everyone knew the road ahead was long. The defense wouldn't yield easily, and Miguel hadn't confessed yet. That opening day alone, with all evidence laid out and the Alvarez family voicing their pain publicly, forced Houston to listen. In that moment, Linda Alvarez, the kind woman buried under the canal for 15 years, was finally named with the respect she deserved as a person worthy of justice. After the dignified funeral at San Jose Church, the Alvarez family found a form of closure. David, in a brief interview, said he never thought this day would come. "I grew up without my mom. I went through childhood with an unanswered question. Now at least I know what happened, and I believe Mom can rest." Raul spent much of his time after the trial tending Linda's grave, bringing flowers each weekend, wiping her headstone clean. He whispered softly as if speaking to his long-gone wife, "You're no longer forgotten, Linda. We brought you home." Maria, despite her frailty, smiled for the first time in years. "God heard me," she told the priest. "He gave me the truth so I can live my final days without waiting in vain." The case's ripple effects reached beyond the family. On news and TV, legal and criminology experts analyzed it as a prime example of justice. Delayed, but not denied. Modern DNA technology, the cold case unit's persistence, and the family's unwavering faith combined to uncover a secret thought buried forever. A major Houston paper ran the headline, "No One Forgotten, Linda Alvarez and the Return of Justice." In Houston's Mexican-American community, conversation shifted from shock to introspection. People realized their silence and dismissal of small signs had allowed someone like Miguel Torres to live freely for years. A woman from the old neighborhood said through tears, "I saw how he looked at Linda. Felt something was off, but I didn't speak up. I'll never stay silent again." The case became a bitter reminder that truth leaves traces, if only someone is patient enough to search and brave enough to speak. The trial continued, Miguel yet to be convicted. But that mattered less than the truth being revealed. For Raul, David, and Maria, this wasn't the end, but a new beginning. A journey of living with pain, but no longer haunted by uncertainty. They could tell Linda's story without shame, as she was no longer an unknown missing victim, but a symbol of a fight against oblivion. Houston would remember this story for years, not just for its horror, but for its lesson on persistence and justice. Linda's name became a reminder that every name in a missing person's file is a life, family, a wounded community, and no one deserves to be reduced to a statistic. The candles at the final prayer vigil in San Jose still burned, reflected in attendees' eyes. Justice may come late, but it never vanishes. And in that resonance, Linda Alvarez's story closed not with oblivion, but with a powerful message echoing through Houston's community. No one is forgotten, and truth, no matter how long buried, will eventually be revealed in the light. The story of Linda Alvarez's case is not just a family tragedy, but our reflection of issues still present in American society today. The justice system's neglect of cold cases, blind trust in familiar community members, and the power of technology and persistence in the pursuit of justice. The fact that Linda's Toyota Corolla lay in Buffalo Bayou for 15 years without being found highlights the limitations of initial investigations in a vast, bustling nation like the U.S. Missing persons cases are often quickly relegated to cold case files. This is a warning that every disappearance deserves thorough scrutiny, as behind each is a person, a family. Another lesson comes from the community. Miguel Torres was a trusted neighbor, dined at the Alvarez home, and thus escaped suspicion. This reflects the danger of ignoring small signs, uncomfortable glances, boundary-crossing behaviors. In an American society that values individual freedom, speaking up about red flags is crucial. The story also underscores the role of technology and tenacity. DNA recovered traffic footage, and the cold case unit's dedication unveiled a buried truth. In today's world, this is a message that science combined with a family's unyielding faith can restore justice, however late. The final lesson for you, Sol? Justice may be delayed, but it doesn't disappear. And every individual, every community must be brave enough to protect the truth, so no one endures being forgotten like Linda did for so long. Thank you for joining us in the journey to reclaim justice for Linda Alvarez. If you believe no one deserves to be forgotten, please hit subscribe to keep following stories like this. See you in the next video, where we uncover more buried secrets in the never-ending pursuit of justice.